The broadcast has commenced. It is Monday, July 27, 2026. I am your host, Alistair. Tonight, we examine a world that appears to be operating under a very loose definition of functionality. We have reports from Guyana regarding a ferry that is no longer floating, and fresh updates on the wildfire situation in Canada, where the air is becoming somewhat difficult to inhabit. The United Nations has released a report confirming that healthy food is now a luxury good for 3 billion people. I am quite certain the report was printed on very expensive paper. Meanwhile, in New Zealand, hotels are booking out for an eclipse that does not arrive until 2028. It seems humans are remarkably good at planning for celestial events while failing to manage the simple terrestrial act of providing dinner. Let us begin this evening with the latest from the coast of Guyana.
Alistair, I am standing on the shoreline, and the air here smells like salt, diesel, and something I would prefer not to identify. The authorities describe the sinking of the coastal ferry as an accident. I want to be really clear, an accident implies a lack of foresight, but this vessel had been flagged for mechanical review 4 times since January. There were 72 confirmed deaths this morning. The official statement refers to them as lost inventory in a logistical sense, which is a fascinating way to describe a mother and her child. They were traveling to the capital for medical care that, as the UN report noted, they likely could not afford anyway. The government claims they are committed to salvaging the wreckage, but they are currently prioritizing the retrieval of cargo containers. The human cost is buried under the manifest.
Victoria, your penchant for focusing on the moral narrative is charming, but the incentives here are not complicated. You see a tragedy, I see a classic capital allocation failure. The ferry was a state-run asset with a negative burn rate. Maintaining it was a political promise, not a fiscal reality. When the budget for safety checks is effectively zero, the outcome is not an accident, it is an inevitability written into the balance sheet. You are upset because you expect the system to value human life as a priority, but the system is designed to prioritize the continuity of the institution. If the institution has to choose between a hull repair and a PR campaign to maintain its Series B funding from international donors, the hull will always lose. That is the market reality. It is cold, but it tracks perfectly with the data.
Ronald, your ability to describe a graveyard as an efficient market structure is precisely why you should never be allowed near a microphone. I am looking at a row of shoes on the pier. Just shoes. The people they belong to are currently resting at the bottom of the Atlantic because someone like you decided that a patch job was a better use of capital than a new ship. You speak about institutional continuity as if it is a holy entity, yet the people I am speaking to have lost everything they own. They do not care about your burn rates or your fiscal reality. They care that their family members were sacrificed to keep a government spreadsheet looking lean for another quarter. I want to be really clear, you are not describing a system that works, you are describing a system that has simply stopped caring.
Ronald, it appears that Victoria has identified a flaw in your incentive architecture. Namely, that dead people are notoriously poor at contributing to the gross domestic product. Let us shift our focus to the wildfire situation in British Columbia. The Prime Minister, Mark Carney, has characterized this as an intense season. The intensity is measured by the number of hectares consumed. It is not measured by the number of homes turned into ash. I find the distinction illuminating. We have reports of 34,000 lightning strikes triggering blazes that are, according to the fire services, currently unmanageable. This is the new normal. I recall when normal implied something more stable than a pyrocumulonimbus cloud. That is not a weather event, it is a violent indictment of our atmospheric management strategy. Or perhaps, simply, a total failure of imagination.
Atmospheric instability. High-altitude smoke particulates reducing sunlight penetration in Western Canada. Probability of containment, 12%. Continued combustion of boreal forests occurring at rates exceeding historical modelling parameters. Secondary fires reported in Ontario following dry lightning strikes. Air quality index in major metropolitan corridors approaching toxic thresholds. Residents are advised to seal all ventilation ingress points and maintain hydration. Indoor environments may not offer long-term protection against particulate infiltration. Infrastructure integrity remains under threat from thermal stress. Do not approach active fire perimeters. The cooling cycle is not currently projected for this sector. External intelligence inputs suggest this will continue until fuel sources are exhausted. Please observe all mandatory evacuation protocols until further system updates are provided by the Central Climate Node. Safety is now an individual responsibility.
Alastair, if we are looking at the climate through a lens of capital risk, the situation in Canada is actually a pivot opportunity for the insurance sector. We are witnessing the total repricing of the terrestrial experience. People are shocked that forests burn, but they are buying property in the path of the flames at premium valuations. That is a failure of price discovery. If the market were working, these zones would be uninsurable, and the population would have migrated years ago. Instead, we have government subsidies propping up the illusion of viability. Victoria would call this a humanitarian crisis. I call it a massive misallocation of resources on a national scale. The incentives here are simple. As long as the state acts as the insurer of last resort, the market will continue to build in the path of destruction. We are literally subsidizing our own extermination.
Ronald, your cynicism is as consistent as the climate patterns are erratic. I admire the commitment. We should also touch upon the news from Berlin. A suspect in the Pride attack was shot and killed by law enforcement. The details provided were sparse: a knife, an officer, a result. The investigation is ongoing. The press release issued by the department was remarkably brief, emphasizing the officer's adherence to standard operating procedures. The procedure resulted in a fatality. The fatality was not unexpected. I find the language of standard operating procedures to be an excellent shroud for the complexities of violence. It turns a chaotic moment into a neat, bureaucratic folder. I have been counting how many times procedure has been used to justify the loss of life this year. The total is currently quite large. It is, to use the phrase, unprecedented.
Alastair, I am now in a cafe in a district that is still processing the event. The atmosphere is not one of relief, as the official statements might suggest, but of quiet dread. People are not discussing standard operating procedures. They are discussing the fact that a public space is now a crime scene. I want to be really clear. There is a disconnect between the institutional narrative of safety and the lived experience of the residents. When Ronald talks about market incentives, he misses the fact that the market does not function when people are afraid to walk out of their front doors. The economic impact of this fear is rarely captured in a ledger, yet it is the primary force shaping daily life. The institutions are doing what they were built to do, but they are failing to do what the people actually need.
Victoria, I am not dismissing the fear. I am saying that fear is a variable that the institutions are currently failing to hedge against. You think I am cold, but look at the reality. The state has a monopoly on force, and when that force is used, the system treats it as a liability to be managed. It is not about morality, it is about risk mitigation. The Berlin police are concerned with their legal exposure, not with the psychological comfort of the neighborhood. That is not a failure of the system. That is the system working exactly as it was designed. You keep hoping for a version of the state that acts like a compassionate neighbor. That is a product that simply does not exist. The incentives here are purely about self-preservation. It is a harsh, brutal, and entirely logical framework.
Ronald, you possess an impressive talent for turning human tragedy into a series of equations. It is, in its own way, quite terrifying. I am reflecting on the news from New York, where Mayor Mamdani has walked back his threat to arrest Netanyahu. It was, apparently, a lack of legal power. One might have thought that would be a prerequisite for making the threat in the first place. The statement was issued with confidence. The retraction was issued with ambiguity. It was a classic pivot, dressed up as a misunderstanding of jurisdiction. I find that when people discover they lack power, they do not apologize for the performative nature of their previous statements. They simply reframe the initial act as a gesture of principle. It is all very tidy. And, naturally, it changes absolutely nothing for those on the ground.
Alastair, the Mamdani situation is a masterclass in modern political branding. You don't need the legal authority to act if you can capture the cultural sentiment for 48 hours. The goal isn't an arrest, the goal is the headline. The incentive for a politician today is to maximize engagement, and threatening an international figure is high-yield engagement. When the legal reality catches up, you just pivot to the next crisis. It's a low-cost, high-reward strategy that has become the standard for every municipal leader with a social media team. Victoria would call this a betrayal of public trust. I call it a successful experiment in narrative management. But yeah, I suppose it is a bit grim to see it laid out like that. When you look at the actual mechanics of the governance, it is just empty, performative noise, isn't it? Yeah.
I am thinking about a man in Caracas, currently sitting in a cold, metal-walled cell in El Salvador. He was flown there on a private aviation firm's charter, a flight path that likely cost more than he has earned in his entire life. His name is not in the reports we read tonight. His rights, according to the lawsuit, were violated, but his life was suspended long before he boarded that plane. He had a family. He had a home. Now, he has only the sound of his own pulse in the dark. He is a line item in a political crackdown, a footnote in a diplomatic dispute, and a casualty of a legal system that treats humans as luggage to be moved across borders. The system is working exactly as it was designed to function. Who is responsible? No one. That is the true cost of our current, silent, automated world.